Hello once again, everyone. This is Bob Martin, the RCSubGuy with the NautilusDryDocks.com, and we have another German submarine to share with you. This one originating from Germany, so it's the real deal. What we have before us here today is a 1/70th scale model of the German 212 submarine, modeled and painted as the Italian export version, so it's got like a green paint job on it. 1/70th scale puts it at about 32 inches of overall length, and this is a really great size. If you follow my channel, which I sincerely hope you do, you'll see that I've had two past subs just in recent months. Those were in 96 scale. I like this a little better because it's got more room inside, a little more presence on and under the water in all scales, though they are a blast to operate, as you'll see coming up a little later on when we share with you some video from its maiden voyage in my pool. But before we get there, I want to share with you how this boat is put together, how it's all set up inside in terms of the internal components, and we'll demonstrate the boat, all of its functions, operational on the bench so you can see how it works. Now, first thing you've got to realize with these Engel boats, these are dry hull boats. The difference between dry hull and wet hull is that dry hull boats basically keep the entire interior of the boat dry, hence the word dry hull. Now, back in the day, when people were first building RC submarines, they would build boxes with flat lids that you had to bolt down. This is kind of a new version, and the idea behind it is that the entire thing is actually a tube. And I'm just going to swivel this. We'll get these components out. And this is what it looks like inside. So all of this goes in the dry compartment of the boat, and if we look inside, you'll see it's just a hollow tube, all sealed up. So there is just one seal that you need to worry about, and that's right here, and that seals against the flange in the back. So this is a bayonet style release system. I kind of like this because your entire equipment tray is one piece. There's no making and disconnecting connections and all of that thing with multiple compartments. Let's take a look at the guts of this thing, starting at the very front here. So this odd-looking device is actually a pressure sensor, and this has a couple of functions. If I remember correctly, the dive system that Engel puts out has a pressure sensor in there. So if the boat dives too deep, it will actually automatically blow the ballast and bring the boat back up to the surface. In some other variations of their submarines, this is used in conjunction with other sensors and the drive board to hover the model. So there's a lot of functionality to it. We've got our main power center in here, and these are nickel metal hydride battery cells wired in parallel. So they're putting out, gosh, I'm trying to remember, almost, I think these are 4.6 amp hour battery packs. And so there's almost 9 amps of power in here, which means this is going to go forever. When we got it, there was actually a third battery, a 5-volt battery that was going to drive the receiver. The previous owner did that, but unfortunately made the boat too heavy. It was nose heavy. With the dry hull boat, it becomes exceptionally difficult to retrim it. So we elected to remove that, and there is a battery eliminator, a voltage regulator in the front, and that now powers the receiver off the main batteries. Here you can see the remote on-off switch that we installed. We have a hose that runs into the intake of the piston tank, and Engel is exceptionally well known for these piston tank ballast systems. So the idea behind it, and we'll show this to you in a bit, is there's a long plunger inside, and as it retracts, it sucks water in through that, and the boat becomes negatively buoyant, or in this case, neutrally buoyant. All of this is the drive components and endpoint switches for the ballast system. This is your ballast system control board. We've got an SL8 75 megahertz receiver, the dual input pitch controller and X-tail rudder controller. And I think that's it for there. The servos on the back, one for each of the parallel control surfaces. And I'll show you this a little later on. Like I said before, X-tails, they're controlled a little bit differently, and they provide about 40% more control over a standard cruciform stern. The drive motor and everything is contained inside this back area. That's one of the downfalls of this design. It's really hard to get at all of these components back here. There is an access hatch, however. If we pop that open, you've got access to all of the linkages and the drive shaft in there. But you can see it's actually really hard to get to the motor. So hopefully nothing ends up going wrong with that. Now that we've got it open and you can see how everything is working, let's go ahead and turn on our transmitter. This is a Pulp Tracker 3 75 megahertz system, and these are the remote fobs. So we're going to turn on the power. We heard our servos all click into place. We'll go through the functions here one at a time. So we've got our rudder controls. So this is left and right. And actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and keep this properly oriented so that you can see how that works. So right full rudder means that all of those control surfaces, the leading edge turns to the left. All 4 control surfaces are now turning the boat, as opposed to that cruciform style where only 2 are. To go up and down, the same sort of an idea. Leading edge goes down to dive the boat and up to surface the boat. Or vice versa, sorry. Up to dive the boat and down to surface the boat. We got our throttle here. Nice and smooth. This is a pretty quick boat. It'll definitely get up and move. Now, the other feature in this is the ballast system. I want to show you this in operation so you can see one of the potential challenges of implementation of a piston-style system in your boat. So like I said, there is a plunger inside, but in order to push and pull it, there has to be a shaft. And that shaft, when it retracts, is going to push into the boat. So you need to allocate a lot of real estate and work around that shaft in this dry compartment of your boat. So let's see what this does when I dive the boat. You can see that worm gear getting pulled in. There you go. This little indicator, this little shaft got pushed out when the piston tank bottomed out and cut power with this limit switch. So you'll see one of the interesting things about a single piston tank system is it fills from front to back, so the boat will dive front to back. With a single tank system, it's impossible unless you integrate some secondary trim systems to dive on an even keel. Going the other way, see that rod pushing into the piston, and it reaches the end point. Now, something else to note, what happens, because this is all sealed up, it's pulling water in, but there's air being displaced. So all of that air is now being forced into the dry compartments of the boat. That watertight compartment on the inside begins to pressure up. So just keep in mind when you design seals for a system like this, they need to not only seal water from coming in, but pressure from going out. Just another design consideration of this style of system. Now, one of the neat things about this though, is that when you've got that air pressure, you can actually use it for something, and they did in this case. So there's a tiny hole in the front of that dry compartment that leads up to a hose that runs to a pneumatic actuator in the conning tower here. So you can see we've got some periscopes and masts here, and they're actually spring-loaded. So when this pressures up, that pneumatic actuator opens, pushes down the periscopes. So when you get into a dive situation, a submerged trim situation, your periscopes retract. You're nice and smooth and streamlined in the water. When you flip your ballast the other way, that pressure releases and some springs return the periscopes up to their extended configuration when you're on the surface. That's a super neat feature. You've got the air pressure, you might as well use it. And it's also simple because there's no electronics, there's no motors, there's no endpoint switches. The only thing about it is the masts tend to suddenly drop and the masts tend to suddenly pop back up again. That's a little bit of a drawback, but certainly not a major one. I'm going to show you that in action here in a moment when I put the guts back in. And it's super easy to do this. It just slides in just like this. Sometimes it catches on that there's a little weights in there. You just got to give it a little twist. Press it forward, give it a quarter twist. Now the boat is all bundled up and ready to go. I'm going to turn my radio back on, turn the model back on. So a few comments about how this boat works. We got some footage playing in the background here. You can see on the surface, strikes a nice profile in the water. The X-tails for the most part are almost fully submerged even in surface mode. So you get a really good turning radius out of the boat, even in surfaced trim. Really though, when this boat shines is when you go into submerged trim. Now, one of the things that I've discovered about this boat, and you could probably mitigate it a little bit, when that piston tank pulls water in, the boat dives nose first, and it gets pretty extreme actually. There's air that ends up getting caught in this open compartment in the back. And sometimes it takes a minute or two for all of that air to get shaken loose. Now, if you were moving forward, you can use the planes to help, move and shake that air out. It certainly wasn't a problem when we were operating it. But just to note, that's something that ends up happening. You could drill more holes in here, and that would help a lot with evacuating the air from that chamber. In full submerged trim, the water line is just below the top of the conning tower, so there is a little bit of positive buoyancy in the boat in case something were to happen. It would eventually float back up to the surface. Another feature of the ballast tank controller is that there is a fail-safe device in there. If it loses signal for whatever reason after a delay of about 7 or 8 seconds, it automatically blows ballast, brings the boat back up to the surface again. In submerged trim, it is an absolute joy to drive. It's got a very tight turning radius and a really quick response to pitch inputs. Perfect pool boat, but because of the slightly larger size over its 96 scale compatriots, I would say that this is also equally viable in a pool or pond environment as well. So, with that, we finished up our overview of this 1/70th scale German Type 212 kit produced by Engel of Germany, out of Germany, obviously. If you have any questions or comments, I would love to hear from you. Go ahead and put a comment down below, but if you want to get a response from me, it's much better and faster to reach out to me via email at bob@nautilusdrydocks.com. If you like what you see, please do like and subscribe. It helps us out here a lot. And with that, we are going to let you go. Have a great day, and we'll catch you next time.